for our webinar. We call this one the ID Masterclass. And this is a, the people that want to sort of dive deeper and really understand the ID at the more nuanced level. And some of you maybe
Paul, this is not not the masterclass. This is
sorry, I'm looking at the wrong deck here. Sorry, thanks, Ian. So this is where we just have an open sharing of IDs and ID sort of insights normally around a topic. So it just gives us something to focus on. And a few weeks back when we did our last public webinar, we focused on resilience. And I'll just give some context for that, particularly for those that weren't here, so you can understand it. These webinars we started almost a year ago. It was the end of March last year, and we started our first webinar as a way of helping people stay in stride through COVID. And we weren't sure how long they would go for and where COVID was going. We just thought, obviously, no matter what COVID represents, we'll all do best if we can do it from a place of being true to ourselves and in stride with who we are. And as we got to the end of 2020, I think a lot of us were thinking, well, 2021 will be different. We'll have either a vaccine or somehow it'll be a more positive year than 2020. And as we got into January, it's like, maybe not. Maybe it's going to be as grueling or more grueling than what 2020 was. And so people realize that this concept of resilience, of having to dig deeper and maybe, last longer, sustain themselves in a more challenging environment, whether it's kids working or studying at home or not being able to go and meet your colleagues face to face, not traveling as often, whatever the restrictions might be that you face, it requires more resilience. And the question came up, is resilience connected to ID? And could understanding our IDs help us be better at being more resilient? And so in our last meeting, we talked about how that connects for the verify and authenticate drives. And then this meeting, we're going to focus on the complete and improvise drives. But before we do, part of our protocol in these meetings is to practice what we preach in terms of being in stride and staying on our game, and just talking through with any of us on the call, any insights that might help each of us do that a little better. So we talk about the peak performance indicator, and which I'll just pull it up for some of you who may not have seen this before. I'll just call this up. There's my screen. Can you see the slide? Yep, great.
Yep, it's in present. It's not in presenter view, though, Paul.
Let me change it. That always happens. Yeah, I can't change it. Hang on a second. Sorry, I'll stop it. I'll shift screens. Maybe this will let me do it. Is it in presenter mode now?
Not showing at the moment, Paul.
You're not showing the slide at all?
No, you've stopped sharing accidentally.
Okay. And what about now?
Perfect.
Great. So this is a little slide that represents what the ID is all about, which this green arrow is you in stride. And when you are true to your ID, this is when you are at your best or presenting the best version of yourself. There are forces in life that pull us off track with who we are. Sometimes we do it almost voluntarily, in order to preserve a relationship or keep other people happy. We try and reinvent ourselves or change how we do things to suit their needs and expectations. But if it's not in line with our ID, it means we're not being true to ourselves. And eventually we get to a point where we can even think, I don't like who I am. I don't like how I'm showing up here. Not only because you're not achieving at your best, but it starts to compromise your personality even, when you come across as a more irritated or frustrated, even angry person, or even just a sick person who's, got different ailments that you might be putting up with, and you think, this isn't me. I don't want to live like this. So the more you get back to who you are and being in stride, that's the best person you can be for yourself and the best person you can be for everyone around you. So that's really the essence of what ID is all about. And we just talk about on a scale of 0 to 10, if 10 is you right on the middle line here, you're in stride, absolutely flying. and a 1 or 2 out of 10 is you're right out to the left or right out to the right, being pulled way out of stride, it's good to just check in and say, what's my number? You know, where am I today? And so that's what we do first as part of these calls, just to say, what's your number? And I would just ask you to share. You might want to do it in the chat, or it might be that you just you know, want to put in that you're high or low, but just share, and you might want to comment on it. So if anyone does have anything they want to share verbally, please feel free to do that. But if you just have a number, you might want to just share it in the chat, those of you who are willing to do that, just to give a sense of, you know, the temperature of the group, as it were. Wow, Judy, you've been consistently up there for several weeks now.
Yep.
So Chris, we're just talking about on a scale of 0 to 10, which if 10 is really in stride, what's your number? You know, okay. Some high numbers there. You know, I was with the group last night in a workshop where everyone was like 4s, 5s, and 6s, and they're doing a job, you know, they're getting by, but they're not enjoying themselves. They're showing up. It's not a lot of fun. And they're saying, well, you know, how do we change that? Is it really within our control? And the more you learn about yourself and become more self-aware around what you need to be your best, so often you can actually get to, you know, you can navigate turbulence from a place of being really in stride and therefore be much more effective. So with that, I'm just going to stop sharing so I can get all of the screen back and see everybody. And, you know, I just want to welcome some people on the call who I haven't seen for a long time. Christo, welcome. It's been a few years, and it's nice to see you guys who have known ID for quite a few years. And I know you still use it in terms of your thinking, but it's great to come back in and get a top up and just, you know, hit the reset button and keep learning some more, not just for your own knowledge, but to all this point about being on track. So let's just stop there. I'm going to let you, some of you I can see have made some comments in the chat. You might want to elaborate. I just want to create the room for you to maybe share a little bit about your number, or if anyone wants some help with how to be in stride, to just let you chat.
I'd like to hear from John when he said he had a major setback. Stride fell a bit to an 8 or 9. That makes me very curious.
That's funny. That wasn't my intent. I'm quite a bit handicapped, but I'm probably one of the worst kind of handicaps because I'm very active and want to stay active, and I have a lot of stuff in my universe I want to explore. But last week I took a major fall, and for like 3 or 4 days I didn't have a leg to stand on, and I was just kind of hobbling along on my crutches, and just things were a lot tougher than they needed to be. That was the setback, and then I'm doing my best to recover, but I'm still not there yet, or not there where I was before, where I could actually walk almost a mile a day. So it's just kind of a little disheartening, but everything else, people come to me and, you know, on the Zoom sessions or stuff, they have no idea. I've just been at it. Internally, I'm like, okay, I need to slow down a little bit. I gotta turn off some of my commitments, or resets people's expectation a little bit. But that's pretty much it.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thanks, John. It's good for you that you know what a 10 looks like, you know, and you, even for some people, an 8 or 9 would be amazing, you know. So it's good for you to know that, firstly, what it can be, but it's probably just that your routine's a little off, you know, given that you're a routine solar person. So at least if you know that, the sooner you get back to that, the more that number comes up. But to your point, you know, you can still be casting a really great influence for other people. Anyone else got something I'd like to share about their number or what's going on for them in terms of being in stride? I have a question I'll ask maybe while someone's thinking of anything they want to share. So Chris, you're new to this whole process and new to Infoblox. I will tell you, you've joined a great organization. I mean, Infoblox is a company that a lot of people on this call know of because, well, a lot of their people come to these calls, and we've had Jesper Anderson, who's your CEO, as one of our game changer interviews there back several months ago. And you've joined a great company with a great culture. I find it interesting, and this is just fun for me, when someone's a 1 in Improvise, you know, and your whole ID, which is very conservative, and you said that you're a 7, but to you, that's a place of being really, you said, but I'm really excited. I'm in a, you know, I'm in a great place because I've just joined a new company. Do you think it's possible to get to a 10, or do you not see a 10? Because probably for a lot of you, for a lot of us, if we were feeling the way you felt, we put a higher score. But are you typically a hard marker, or do you see a 10?
I would say I tempered that 7 with the fact that, like, I'm excited to be at a new job that I'm really enjoying so far, but I'm tempering that with, like, as my number may indicate, like, I'm somebody that values highly being a subject matter expert, and I'm still in learning mode. So
Right.
I'll feel more in stride when I have some time behind me and have the confidence to know that I've got a handle on the body of knowledge that will make me feel more in stride, if that makes sense.
Beautiful, beautiful, well said. Because that's right. You've got the benefit of the newness and the excitement of something new, but you're absolutely right. As a strong verifier, and for that matter, an authenticator, because the more you get under the hood, as it were, and understand all the mechanics of how the company and how your role ticks, and you can see how it all fits together, that is going to make you feel like, if you think it's exciting now, it's going to be even better when you get to that place. So you're quite right that if that's going to be the 10, then 7's probably the right score today. But good that you're at a 7, given how new you are to everything. That's you know, great for you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Anybody else? All right, and I just see, Christy, you asked the question in the chat that, is it 5 years? That's a long time, isn't it? 5 years since we've first met over there. So Krista's you're still in the Bay Area, Krista? Yeah. So asking the question, well, why don't we let you talk to it in case there's something behind your question?
Well, I was just, so it's super interesting. I have a girlfriend who just got her ID drives and has asked me to support her and kind of talk to her about it, since she knows that I had mine done. So I was rereading my report recently, and it's been 5 years since I've done it. And hopefully I've grown and developed as a human being. So I was just curious, like, how often should you go back and redo your drives? Like, how will it look different 5 years later? Because professionally, I did a lot of work. And so I'm just curious what your recommendation or best practices are.
Well, I find it interesting that it's normally the people who are the verifiers that talk about wanting to redo the ID.
Yeah.
And by virtue of that,
so I guess I'm still one of them. I'm just hoping my improvisation has gotten a little bit better. I'm hoping.
Well, your improvisation does get better with more experience, so when you are, all of us improvise, but we improvise through our ID. So people who have it as their natural instinct do it just because it's their instinct. But as a verifier builds more and more experience at something, they look like they're improvising more, but it's only because they've got more of a repertoire to draw from, So for example, I know people that get up and say they gave a speech off the cuff. And you go, was it really off the cuff? And they go, well, it's actually a speech I did, a few weeks ago, and I remember the sort of the bones of it. So it looked off the cuff, and I was more comfortable doing it because I had something to draw from my past, Whereas when an improviser is doing it off the cuff, it's truly the first time they're thinking of the words is when they're coming out of their mouth, And so rather than trying to become somebody else or more of a certain instinct than what might be your nature, it's more about how do you succeed with being who you are, and you're always going to be your best influence and greatest impact when you're coming from a place of experience and substance and preparedness, because that's what your ID is, a strong verifier. That's what it would be, You're welcome to redo the ID. We have people who constantly redo it, but I swear if we went in and looked at all the people that have ever done their redone their ID, probably 90% of them are verifiers just wanting to check and make sure that it's still the right ID. You know, we probably should run that research, Sarah, and see what it, you know.
Oh, totally. It's yes.
Yeah, it's always fun for me when people ask that question and you sort of say to them, so why do you want to know? Well, I just want to check and make sure it's right. And I'm like, so what's your ID? You know, I like verify. They just prove it by the question. All right. So anyone else before we move into resilience? Okay, let me share the slide on resilience, and this is just to provoke the conversation. This isn't necessarily because it's the only discussion to have. Let me get this right. Am I sharing? No, I'm not sharing yet. Okay, can you see the slide now?
It's the peak performance at the moment, Paul.
Oh, sorry. Should have gone down to the next one. Here we go. So this is just to provoke the conversation. And if we're just going to focus on the two on the right-hand side on complete and improvise today. So this is about, if you're going to be more resilient and you've got these drives, so you're pretty much either going to be up or down in one of these drives. And some of you might be in the middle on both if you're like 7-3-5-5. But listen anyway, because it might help you learn for people close to you that you might be able to help be more resilient. These are just like what we want to talk about. And this is an open conversation. So it's more a discussion than a training. What do you draw on to be more resilient? Like where do you go to so that you can dig deeper, feel more solid, retain your confidence, and be more resilient? And it'd be really interesting to hear from those of you who are completers. We'll start with the complete drive as to, okay, is it about leaving a legacy, for example? Do you think, you know, when you're getting wobbly and frustrated, do you think, okay, I'll think of the longer term and the legacy I'm leaving? Like, where do you go and dig deeper? Or is it, I revert to a plan? If I've got a plan, that's, as long as I'm working a plan and feeling I'm making progress and momentum on the plan, that gives me resilience. Or is there something else altogether that's not here? And by the way, some of you who are avoid complete, you might live or work with people that are completers and you've seen what they do, and feel free to share that. We just want to build this out and help those of you who are completers develop a good understanding of what you can draw on to be more resilient.
I can certainly speak to that, Paul.
Floor's yours, Judy.
What was mine?
I said the floor is yours. Go.
Oh, got it. Thank you. So I work best when I have a plan and I can observe my progress. And when I was sick, I had a plan and I couldn't do anything about it. And so I was about a 4 or 5, something like that. Sometimes I didn't even want to talk about what my number was. Now, I also have learned that what's real important for me, because I am avoid verify, empathy, listening, collaboration, acceptance, trusting my gut, essential to me. Essential. So being on these calls, in addition to all the other support I've had, especially in the last year, has helped me to really develop a much better plan. And, you know, I'm just beginning to realize how strong the driven, that keyword driven, it's all in capital letters. When I am driven, I mean, there must be a Mack truck behind me, pushing me, because once I get going, and this happened to me on Sunday, I was having such a blast doing things, you know, executing my plan. They were small things. okay, that's done. Okay, that's done. Okay. And I got more and 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 more excited. When I went to bed, I put my body in bed, but my mind was not ready to leave the plan. So I've been thinking about that. That's when this thing about being really driven, I got the awareness about it. And so I've been doing more talking to myself. Your phrase, life is perfect, has been so helpful to me. I've had a phrase of my own that I had forgotten about. In everything, there's a gift. Life is perfect. I've shared that with a lot of people. And so my awareness has been growing. And when I got well, first thing that returned was my physical energy, then my emotional energy, my inspirational energy, and now the creativity spigot has been turned on. My greatest work is in front of me. I know that. I've done a lot of good things in my life, and I'm just getting started.
That's great to hear, Judy. So do you see something else you've drawn on as a completer other than what's on the chart here? Is there, like, one of the things I heard was you changed to a different plan. Well, I think I heard that, you know, you had a plan that was sort of blocking you and it wasn't taking you where you wanted to be. So you came up with a new, more constructive plan. Is that right? Or I misheard you?
Well, I was really unclear about my plan because prior to last year, I had been a caretaker for my former husband. Now, so I'd start on something and he'd call and say, I need help. I couldn't handle the interruptions. See, at that time, I didn't know it. It's only now I can see, oh, that's one thing that took me out of stride. So you know, not being able to complete anything and getting him to complete anything was a real, very stressful event. So whatever plan I had that I don't have clarity about, I wasn't able to execute anyway because there were too many probably assumptions also, and interruptions. And you know, so many people told me, Judy, you're divorced. You know, this is your ex-husband, remember? You know, all these things. I said, I got it. I got to do this. I had to complete with Joe. And that he had to die for that to happen. I'm very happy he is where he is. His body wouldn't support him anymore. He was still working his mission 24 hours before he died. So now, then I did all the legal stuff, getting all his stuff taken care of. And then February 20th, kaboom, I got sick. So nauseated, so confused, couldn't figure out where to go from there. That lasted till approximately December 20th. I continued to exist, but not live. I'm living now.
That's good. Well, it's the power of having a new perspective and a new plan.
Yeah.
Thanks, Judy. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Anyone else got something they want to share on this complete drive and resilience?
I was going to jump in, Paul. Just sorry, Judy. I was just. It was actually sort of a little bit different to Judy. It was not a new plan. I actually, for resilience, I go to routine, and that actually helps the actual knowing exactly what I'm going to do and being even more stuck in the plan than I would normally. And that actually helps me get my momentum back. So even, because I think the danger sometimes you can, if things start hitting you, you'll just give up. You won't go to the gym. You won't do your walks. You won't do all the stuff that you normally do. And I think for someone with the use complete drive, I think that's the worst thing. I personally, I just find stick to it, even if you're not necessarily enjoying it in the moment, but that will gradually get you the momentum
That's
back.
good. That's good. Thanks, Ian. Sarah, I know you're going to chime in.
Oh, I was just gonna, so on the resilience part, and I get that, like, we have our plan, right? And we want to do our plan, but I think learning to change the plan and be like, oh, okay, I have to scrap plan A, but now I'm making progress on plan B. And kind of focusing on like making progress on the new path, even if it's not what you like originally wanted. And yeah.
Is it possible for a completer to drop plan A and go to plan B if plan A isn't finished? Can you really do that?
It's taken me a lot of practice, but I'd say I can. And I think having like that shift of like understanding that like plan A is no longer valid right now. That's not what is important. It's helping no one. The only reason I want to do plan A is just for like me to stick to the, you know what I mean? Right. Yeah. And learning to kind of let go of that and, recalibrate basically.
Yeah, that's good.
Can I check in, Sarah? To let go of that plan A, it has to be, I've been thought it has to almost like be a disaster or a collapse. You don't just let go of it easily, and that you really need to move to plan B because staying with plan A is actually a worse setup. You can't just do it like, oh, well, let's give it a try. Doesn't it have to have some crunch to it?
Yeah, it does need to be like, I guess it needs to make sense, but I think that like old Sarah, right, would be stuck on plan A, whether or not it still made sense, because like that was the thing and I want to finish the thing, and recognizing like when you have to abandon it because it's no longer the right thing instead of just sticking to it for the sake of it. You're muted.
You're on mute, Greg. Greg, you're on mute.
My clients have the trouble with that, where they're having trouble letting go of the original thing because it's the world saying, no, we're not going there. And it has to get really difficult for her before she goes, oh, okay, finally. And we're trying to speed up the process for everybody else. And I was wondering, what has to happen for you to go, okay, all right, now I will shift.
Well, again, it did take me a while. I'll admit that. It's definitely a learned skill. Gosh, I guess I go into it also with the mindset of just because I'm starting on plan A doesn't mean I'm finishing on plan A. And so like I've already been like, yeah, this is like what I want to do, but I know that like I'm not necessarily going to stay the course. And the best thing isn't always, because you're going to get new information all the time, right? And so being able to adapt your plan based on new information as it comes in is, important.
When I think about completers that have dropped plan A to go to plan B, and I might be wrong, I'm just thinking of a variety of people here. They've only really done it when they've been forced to do it. When something happened and it's forced, there was no choice but to do it. So, something out of their control or someone forced them, whether it was because of authority, like they were their boss or their parent, or, something gets invoked where they have no choice but to move to plan B. It took something like that. I haven't seen them do it necessarily where they've chopped the chains halfway through A, gone to B voluntarily.
It's Gail here. Can I ask a question? It's about a completer I work with, and it's her relationship. They'd had a bit of trouble, so they did some IVF and had a baby. And 6 weeks later, the husband walked out. And what I describe is as if it's her happy ever after has vanished. And she's at 6s and 7s. Her normal organization skills have become more like mine, totally disorganized. And she can't get herself to a new happy ever after. She talks about buying a house, but she can't organize to actually get properly divorced. You just watch her and you think, how on earth is she managing? And as I say, my simple description is her happy ever after has vanished and she can't find a new one. And I'd love to know from a completer, just so that I can help her in some way, because we're all really concerned for her and we love her dearly. The stability in her life, aside from the little girl, I think is her work environment.
Sorry.
Go, Sarah. Great.
So my first thought, and when I'm feeling like overwhelmed in a situation, is to pick something that's easy that I can do. And so, like getting a divorce, buying a house, those are all big things. What's like a small thing that she can break off and accomplish to kind of take that step towards feeling a little bit more in control?
Thank you.
I will say, when it comes to personal relationships and things like that have happened, Gail, until they get the next I shouldn't say until, time is a healer I think for completers.
Yep.
But often it's not until they get momentum in the next relationship and they can start to see how they can rebuild Humpty Dumpty, and get back to having a new happily forever after plan. It's probably something like that. If, we sort of get rid of the theory and look at what practically will happen, it's not until they have a mechanism to replace the old original dream.
I'll share something with Vera's a completer, as you know. My wife's a completer, an 8, and she has a saying when she's just finished something, could be getting ready to go to the river or something. She's packed the lunch or whatever, and she says to herself, "Oh, okay, perfect." And then it's something else, oh, perfect. And I look at it, I go, that's not perfect. I mean, it's a good lunch, but and so I'm taking her literally, and she goes, in German, the word perfect means it's done. And you look it up and you'll find complete, whole, finished. It just means perfect for her, just means, okay, that part's done. Okay, that part's done. And you could confuse her for thinking that she's doing a verify version of perfect. And it isn't that at all. And it just what your line about, little steps, little progresses. And she's like the happiest little kid in a fashion. She goes, okay, perfect. And every time she gets a little perfect, she builds on that. And she'll work through the day and people go, where's your energy? She goes, what energy? She's just stacking one Lego after another. And when they can't stack and when there's no Legos to add, that's when they are in a puddle. And I think we sometimes need to let them just bubble in the puddle because they got nothing for a while.
Thank you for that, Greg.
Anything else on resilience that completers can share that, what have you used to be more resilient? Steve, you want to chime in?
Yeah, Paul, good morning. I think if for a completer, rather than changing the plan, when you design the plan at the front, I found having options as a stronger approach. So therefore you don't get locked into one. So then for a completer becomes the ability to be agile. And when you've got options, if something is going pear-shaped or not working, rather than your boss or situation driving the decision, that you say, well, your self-awareness says this isn't going to work. So therefore you change mid-stride and make the alterations. It might be minor tweaks, but rather than just having one plan A, and that's it, I've learned in life, you've got to have multiple plans because you've got multiple people with different views and strategies, and one doesn't necessarily fit all. So being versatile, having the capacity to move quickly. So therefore in your initial planning stage. So I am one for routine, task list, getting things done as part of managing that activity, and learn to not necessarily have to wait to the 100% everything, all the information is, but going at 60 to 70% and trusting that my awareness will pick up the variations and adjust it accordingly.
That's an interesting perspective. I think that's I haven't heard that before from a completer, where in doing the plan, if I'm hearing you correctly, you do the plan, but your plan includes a variety of options so that it forces you not to get stuck on one road, as it were.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay.
This
It's
additional.
almost, oh, go on, Steve.
Go on. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I actually use the expression catastrophize it first. So plan for the worst case scenario, and then if you can manage that, you can manage anything else along the way.
Oh, that's true. They do that.
Yeah, so I've got a project management background, Ian, so that's very, very relative, very put in perspective, because you're managing risks and you don't want risks to become issues. So yes, you're looking at it that way. But the other thing I was going to say, Paul, is one of the things I learned as a completer, when you become very task focused and you become resilient in trying to stop things falling over, as a completer and detail orientated, you can become very sharp in your analysis. And when you're talking with some other drives who may not necessarily be high in the detail, and you spot things which are just obviously not correct. And if you're totally focused and drop off the empathy, you can actually become across, and I found I had to learn to stop being cold and hard-nosed and come across arrogant, which I'm not. But when I'm focused as a completer and wanting to get the job done, I found the tendency to become across it just very to the point. And without empathy, sometimes that upset a few people along the way. So that's just one of the pitfalls to be wary of that I am aware.
We're not there yet, Steve. I'll call it out now, though, just because you've raised it and it's relevant. So what happened, it's more to do with the improvised drive. And I often say when an avoid improvise person, which in your case is your strongest drive, that avoid improvise. So when an avoid improviser gets stressed and really busy, it's like their personality evaporates and they can become more robotic and less charismatic, less connecting with other humans, you know? So the improvised drive is all about energy and the adrenaline and the animation and the positivity and excitement, a lot of which comes from interacting with people. And when you think about the avoid improviser being more one to want to work on their own, solitude, what energizes them, and you now get really busy, really frustrated, you might be really stressed, you just amplify that element of it, you know? And a lot of people will say, oh, it's that person's so serious. And yet when they're out on the weekends, you know, it's more relaxed and they're not as stressed. Oh, they're a bucket load of fun. Why can't they move all like that when they're at work? And so I think it's a really cool component of self-awareness to be aware that when you are at work, there's still humans, I'm assuming there are humans around you who need to engage and connect with you and want that charismatic side of you as well. We've all got it to give, but the knowing your ID helps you to understand how to regulate it so that you can always show up and still be a connector with other people.
Spot on.
All right, shall we move to the avoid complete drive and talk about, for those of you who are avoid complete, where do you go to be resilient? Given that this is the drive that chops and changes quite a bit anyway, resilience can be, on the one hand, you know, can almost seem at odds with this drive because they chop and change so quickly. But there are things that we need to stay working with for the longer haul. How do you get that? How do you get that resilience? Like, you're not going to give up on your kids. You're not always going to give up on your marriage. You're not going to give up on, you know, roles and careers. So where do you go to get that resilience?
Paul, I think I'm having trouble isolating the avoid complete drive from what other really drives me. I mean, I've got the 8 and the 2, but for that drive, I just have to move. I just have to go to get resilience, get unstuck. And it can be almost anything. Go order the sock drawer, put some order to where the knives and forks are kept or something. Like, just go do something that gets me. I was trying to say useful, but that's the 8 drive. That's my authenticate that needs to be useful. I think this one, just move. Like, I'll just change position or doodle or something like that. And as soon as I'm moving and doing something different, I'm out of that whatever was stuck state that had no resiliency. So it's kind of like, just move.
So that fits, as you know, that fits with the authenticate drive. I'm wondering whether, Greg, something you taught me, I've put down here exploring options, and I can see that's good on one hand, but I wonder, you're someone that to me removes options. Like when there's no other option but to do this, like I remember you saying to me, you weld the door closed, and there is no other option. So therefore it causes a creativity and innovation to just keep going forward and being resilient. But I'm wondering whether, on the one hand, avoid completes like options, but to be resilient, maybe it comes best when there is no other option. So I've got to therefore get innovative and creative.
Yeah, where that works is when there's too many choices, you don't have a place to start. The real key for me, I wrote down just do something. It really is just start. And what you do is you pick one, and you don't worry about ranking it or whether it's the right one. You got to pick one, because the starting is actually where the creativity begins.
Okay, that's good. There you go.
Ilona has always said when she's kind of in that place, she'll like organize her closet or organize a drawer. And you said, exactly the same thing, Greg. And I think it is about just like doing something, whether or not it's the highest priority, but it's just kind of like getting something settled so it feels less chaotic and you can go forward in whatever else you want to do. But
you just betrayed your own drive there, Sarah. That was great. It isn't just get more settled. I love that.
But she's also, like Greg, she's an 8 in authenticate. So the doing would relate to that too. But I think Greg's right. If you just get started, that creates a circuit breaker, creates an energy. There's so much energy to avoid completing starting something.
It's Gail here. You know what I do? I talk. So I've got something and I'm really not sure what it is I'm meant to be doing or which way it's going to go or what's happening. So I just start talking to somebody, and usually it's Jeff, and he's saying, what do you want about? I said, look, I'm just using you as a sounding board. Talk it through. It takes 2 minutes and I now know what I'm doing, move on. And it's about whether the 9 comes in there and whether the down verifies well a bit, but I just get there and I know what I'm meant to do. So I talk.
Okay. Well, I think the talking is improvised, but the starting piece, I think to Greg's point, is the avoid complete. Anyone else got something different for the avoid complete drive for resilience? I don't know how this fits, but I have heard avoid completes talk about having a cause as opposed to a purpose. I don't know whether this, but whereas verifiers are driven by having purpose, there's something about having a cause. So when a verifier is wanting to dig deeper and be more resilient, if they can attach a purpose to it, then that allows them to stay more on mission and resilient. I'm wondering whether or not the concept of seeing something as a cause, or when you have a cause, does that muster up anything for avoid completes to be more resilient?
I wouldn't know if I'd call it a cause, but I know it. I would. When you just said that, I thought I want to untangle it. I want to free us up, because remember, it's just the avoid complete drive. So we're avoiding having it be done and fixed and working and follow. So anything that loosens it up, walks it. It's like playing a billiard game or pool. You just hit that cue ball and it's a new game because all the balls are in a different place now. And I think to get resilient is to untangle, untether, and get things more open and loose. And the cause would therefore be to free things up. As you're speaking, this is never thought about like this, but just get free, like, because I know the last thing I hear in my head before I act is screw it, and I just go, and what that winds up doing, it really just rattles stuff. It shakes the cupboards, and things are new, and from that shaking, some opportunities emerge.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you. All right, let's move to the Improvise drive. What do improvisers do to get more resilient? I've said hope, because I remember talking about people like in a marriage, and I'll say to them, why are you keeping on going with it? What's keeping you there? That even when the person is lacking love and they feel they're right against the ropes, and they say, well, I have hope. Whenever I've got hope, I can be resilient. And when they've finally gotten out of that role at work or in a relationship, and say, what was the pivot? What was behind the move? They say, I ran out of hope. So that's why I put hope in, to provoke this conversation of whether or not it's like the ultimate means of resilience for an improviser is having hope, and losing hope is what takes it away. And then, of course, impact and positivity would make sense as well, that whatever it's positive and dynamic and fun and of high impact, there's more chance it's going to keep you engaged and resilient. Any of our high improvisers connect to what you draw on for resilience?
Yeah, Paul, I certainly relate to wanting and needing hope. And I think it drives the verifier mad, because I link that back actually to the exploring options. Always looking at an option that may not be possible. And and that links back to the high improvise too, that there's a risk attached to that other people just think that's impossible. Whereas I'll say, well, give it a go. It might be possible. And hope's so important. And I think somebody connected that very much to me a long time ago when he said it's very important for you to have brightness of future. And when you lose that brightness of future, you can get quite negative about things, and that can cause a lot of anxiety. So yeah, exploring the options and looking at something that might be impossible to others is so important to me as a 9 and improvise and a resistant 2 incomplete. So I think all those things, those factors build together to build quite a big picture for me, looking at that hope and explore options and innovation when other people wouldn't see a possibility to innovate.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Thank you.
Paul, can you hear me? It's Joe.
We can hear you, Joe.
Thank you. So the two things that were in my brain when you were talking about that was making a difference, and that's based on impact and positivity. So all the things that Greg said, because I think for me, I've got a very strong use authenticate, avoid complete, use improvise, and so they all really tie up together. But it really is all about being able to make a difference and to somebody else, which I guess almost comes back. Was having difficulty splitting between cause and purpose, I suppose, and I still am a little bit. But for me, if there is a whole resilience, taking action is critical, just making a move like Greg, but being able to make an impact, make a difference, and connect with positivity, connect with positive people, those are all pretty much intertwined for me. And that's how I've always, I guess, used that bouncing back or even bouncing forward, as I call it, which is the whole resilience thing to me, is bouncing forward past where you've come from or where you were before. So yeah, those things tie up.
And the subtlety of this, I would say, it's not just positivity, it's also the removal of negativity, because it's
absolutely,
you know what I mean? Like on the one hand, there might be an absence of positivity, but you can actually work to remove the people and forces that could be negative influences in your life. And at least you don't necessarily think it's positive, but at least it's getting rid of the negative. And negativity just literally sucks the life out of an improviser. It just, you can't function. It's paralyzing. So sometimes it's not about how to find positivity, it's how to remove negativity.
Mm.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that, because if I've got somebody who's sucking my energy, I just have to walk away. And once I've walked away or got out of that, I'm like, oh, the space opens up and anything's possible again. So you're dead right. Mm.
I think it's an element for those of you who are avoid improvisers on this call. It's something I found a lot of avoid improvisers really struggle to get, is like, because avoid improvisers do things from a place of responsibility and obligation. Like, even though it's not exciting, even though it's not fun, even though there's nothing in it, it's just got to get done. So let's just do it. And it almost defies their thinking to think, but how can an improviser not function? If it's got to get done, it's got to get done. And it's just the makeup of an improviser, that if there's no energy in it, you just can't. It's like saying hold your breath for 10 minutes. You just can't. You know, there's a need, and that's why we call it, there's a need for that injection of energy, like an electricity, to make the machine work, the machine being that human as an improviser. it's a really interesting piece, because when the avoid improvisers don't have that electricity, they're still as functional, which is one of their strengths. That, okay, just because there's no noise about it, nothing exciting, I still have to get in and do it. And that is one of your hallmarks. It's very, very different for the improviser. And it truly is a paralyzing, dysfunctional, can't function place if there is negativity, particularly, let alone a lack of energy.
Can I just add one thing to that, Paul? The only thing I would say about that is, if I can see that the impact that I'm going to make by actually doing that thing is going to be really significant, then that can give me the impetus to do what I need to do, even though I'm feeling incredibly negative about it. And then it comes back to getting the positivity out of just taking that action, and getting some momentum, because that's a different type of positivity for me.
That's right, because you can see a way forward.
Absolutely see some momentum.
Yeah. All right, let's now talk about the avoid improvisers, who are almost the captains of resilience, at least where I look at, because of that very point, that when things are in struggle street and the pressure's on, or you've just got to dig deeper, it's almost like the tougher it gets. What do they say? When the going gets tough, the tough get going. That is where a lot of the avoid improvisers really live, But I wonder what it's like for you, really. And I'd love to hear the sharing of, for all that you do seem to thrive in the struggle, are you really thriving? Do you run out? Do you have to really consciously try and be resilient, or does it come so naturally that it's not even a thought process? Please help us who aren't like you.
I mean, you touched on it already earlier. I mean, it has to do with wanting to find meaning, as opposed to, like, meaning as a long-term objective, as opposed to needing to find happiness and contentment in the moment. And because, like, speaking as myself, I mean, I'm a 1 in that category. I'm less moved by, like, the immediate emotional impact of something than I am by, like, what is this contributing to overall?
Right, for the longer term.
And that, as long as I would be more apt to withdraw if, like, I would rather be, I guess, in that framework, unhappy in the moment, working towards something of ultimate meaning, than quote unquote happy on something that I didn't feel was ultimately meaningful.
Yep. Thanks, Chris. That's really good.
I think it might also be about, like, the risk of, if I don't, like, suck it up and do this thing now, what's the risks down the road of, like, if you're going through PT because you've got an injury and it sucks, and now you have to do all of these exercises. Well, if I don't do the exercises now, it's going to take me 4 months longer to come back to it and to be where I want to be. So, like, what's the risk of giving in, I guess, to the weight?
Okay.
I'd actually throw in the word obligation. I think for the avoid improvise, and I think it does sort of also I think when Chris was saying before, that's that sense of it's an obligation. An obligation is almost like a driving force sometimes, and I think there's two sides to that, because it can mask other stuff, so you've got to be conscious of it. But I think it can certainly help with resilience. It's like, I've got to keep doing that. I've got to keep doing that. Almost like what I was saying with the completer. But I think there's a different sense there. To me, it's obligation. Keeps us going.
It's a good way to put it, because I mean, I'll often find in the headspace, like, I would much rather let myself down than someone else down. And so if you have that sense of duty or obligation, that's a big motivating factor for sure.
While we've got you, Chris, can you unpack for me what you mean by meaning? Because you said when it has meaning, it sounded like a bit, it had legacy, it had legs or something like that. what gives something for you a sense of meaning? I don't want to miss a chance of hearing a one describe this, because you got a depth to this that not a lot of people have.
I mean, when I talk about meaning for myself, like it's impersonal. Like legacy to me would be me being concerned about people remembering me. Whereas when I talk about what's meaningful, it's a little more detached. It's more like I'm contributing to something that's going to be of general benefit to everyone, not something that's going to make people think about what I specifically did. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really good, because I was worried about the word legacy before when we were talking about this with some other drive, and I went, my wife's up 8 and 2 in those last 2 drives, and it's never about her. It's about the thing lasting. Like her father was that way. He was an engineer. It had to outlast his life and his kid's life. Then it was okay, you know. So you're mirroring that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
If I could just chime in a moment. I'm Laura, and I'm a 1 on Improvise. And when you were describing Paul, resilience and avoid improvise it, and I'm not going to say this well, but the integrity I feel and the perseverance of getting through challenging things, it's innate. It's something that I have to do. I just don't have a choice. But there's something twangled in there that is tiring, and that's kind of well, maybe it's my situation, but it's eating at the happiness, and it comes at a cost. It comes at a cost, and I maybe haven't found the right way to fit in this world. You know what I mean? But it's I can't untwangle them, and it's interesting concept. I would love to talk with you more about this.
Well, I'd be happy to do that. If you want to reach out and connect, I'd be very happy to spend the time with you and explore it. I do find it interesting. I remember this engineer I was working with last year, and he was moaning and groaning about his role. And halfway through all of his whining, he sort of looked up and he goes, I actually love it. And he just smiled, and he was like, in all of the struggle and the fighting and the sweat, you know, and Craig Alexander, who some of you know from one of my interviews, who was the world Ironman champion, he will tell you, like, for all that it is putting his whole body on the line, and it's one of the most grueling things you can do. One of the things he loves most about competing is that it's, you know, it's such a struggle, and he has got to dig so deep beyond what is aware of his own capability to be. So there is something about, you need that toil, and yet you either then choose to see it as a struggle, or you see it as it's where I live. You know, it's fulfilling to me. And that's what I'm finding is I dig with some people, I just change their perspective on it and say, you know what, I'm going to start enjoying it more when I'm doing it, because I think I do enjoy it actually, you know.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
So guys, we're right on the top of the hour. This has been really helpful. I'm going to take all the comments from our last discussion and this one as well, put them into a revised matrix like the one you see on the screen, and then we'll share that. It'll be on our site, and Ian will send it out to everyone that's been on this call. There's a lot of people that I know want to be part of it. They've, you know, the recording can be sent out and they can listen to all this afterwards. But thanks for being here. It's great to see some new faces, particularly those of you who are brand new to ID. This is a wonderful way for you to get up to speed really quickly and not only learn about your ID and some of the nuances, but people who are really different to you, because I think that how you interact with others who are different is where a lot of the power in this really does lie. So thank you for being here. Have a great rest of day and week, and we'll look forward to hopefully seeing you again next week. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Paul. Cheers.